He divorced her at 58. She bought an old restaurant with her last dollar. Only for this to happen. Loretta Mae Simmons stood on the cracked sidewalk of Edgewood Avenue in Atlanta's Old Fourth Ward, staring at a faded sign that read Delia's. Her hands trembled around the keys. 3 weeks earlier, her husband of 30 years had handed her divorce papers and taken everything. The house with the marble countertops she'd picked out, the luxury car she'd helped pay for, and every dime she'd earned keeping his real estate empire running while raising his children. Calvin Simmons had spent 18 months rewriting deeds, hiding assets, and smiling at her across the dinner table like nothing was wrong. By the time the lawyers finished, Loretta's name was on nothing. She walked away with 2 suitcases, an old sedan, and $22,000, barely enough to disappear. But Loretta didn't disappear. She spent $21,000, her last dollar, on this collapsing soul food restaurant that nobody wanted. Miss Delia Pratt, the 84-year-old owner, had lowered the price just to get rid of it. "It's been dead 8 years, honey," she'd said, handing over the keys. "Good luck." Loretta stepped inside. The air smelled of dust, old grease, and something deeper, something familiar she couldn't name yet. She came to measure the kitchen, notepad in hand, listing what worked and what didn't. She wasn't looking for miracles. Then she saw the storage room door at the back. It wasn't on her list, but something pulled her forward. She opened it. The light from the kitchen sliced across the floor and stopped at her feet. Broken chairs, dust-covered boxes, and against the far wall, wooden crates draped in canvas. Loretta pulled the fabric away. 31 glass bottles stared back at her, each sealed with red wax, each labeled in faded ink. *Treme Original. Estelle Mae Williams. New Orleans, Louisiana. Her grandmother's name. Loretta's knees buckled. She sank onto a crate and picked up a bottle. The glass was cool, the label worn but unmistakable. She was back in New Orleans again, 12 years old, standing barefoot in Estelle's tiny Treme Street kitchen. The air thick with cayenne, butter, and that secret sweetness only her grandmother knew. Every weekend, neighbors lined up for jars of Treme Original hot sauce. Estelle bottled it by hand, laughing, "This ain't just sauce, baby. This is legacy in a jar." Loretta had carried the recipe book with her when she moved to Atlanta at 24. She'd married Calvin at 27, trusting him completely. She never imagined he'd spend decades erasing her from their life. But here it was, 31 bottles that had waited 8 years in the dark for exactly this moment. The next morning, Loretta found more than bottles. A folder of letters between Estelle and Miss Delia stretched back 15 years. Monthly orders, handwritten notes, manufacturing agreements signed in 1987. The brand rights belonged to Estelle and her direct heirs. Loretta was the only one left. A lawyer on Auburn Avenue confirmed it. Pre-marriage asset. Separate property. Yours, clean and clear. Word traveled fast. Rowan Elijah Dupree, head of the largest black-owned food company in the South, had been hunting Treme Original for 3 years. When the ownership filing hit public record, his team called within hours. Rowan met Loretta at his Midtown restaurant. He slid an old folder across the table. Distribution records, rave reviews from the 90s, letters begging for more sauce. "I grew up on this taste," he said softly. "Cayenne, butter, and something sweet underneath. Your grandmother's kitchen smelled just like mine." He didn't want to buy her out. He wanted partnership. Your name on every bottle. My distribution. Equal shares. Loretta thought of the empty restaurant, the bills coming due, and the fire in her veins that Calvin could never steal. She said yes. Calvin found out through his daughter Camille, who had been calling Loretta every week pretending to check on her, then texting every detail straight to her father. When he learned about the brand, he tried to claim it as marital property. "We can settle quietly," he told Loretta on the phone, voice tight. She laughed once, sharp and cold. "You took the house. You took the car. You took 30 years of my work. You had 18 months to decide what was fair. You already decided." She hung up. The judge threw out his challenge in minutes. The dates were ironclad, but the court battle opened a bigger door. A federal investigation into Calvin's pattern of asset stripping began. 3 other ex-wives came forward. His son, Devin, who had signed the fraudulent documents, lost his real estate license at 31. No one in Atlanta would hire him. Camille's husband discovered her spying and filed for divorce. Calvin's mistress left the moment the story hit the papers. The empire he'd spent 30 years building crumbled in weeks. Loretta never lifted a finger against him. She simply let the truth do the work. 8 months later, Treme on Edgewood opened its doors. The line stretched around the block before noon. The smell of cayenne, butter, and that secret sweetness drifted onto the street. Every table had a bottle of Treme Original glowing under the lights. Loretta hung her grandmother's 1987 photo by the kitchen door. Estelle smiling, arms full of jars. Staff and customers passed it every day like a blessing. She hired Ruthie and Bowman, the maid who had quietly warned her about Calvin's shady accounts, as front-of-house manager with full benefits and a seat on the board. "You tried to save me when no one else did," Loretta told her. Ruthie wiped tears and smiled. "We built this together." Miss Delia, now in a nursing home in Decatur, received monthly checks and fresh bottles of sauce. "I kept them because I couldn't throw away something Estelle made," she whispered when Loretta visited. "I knew someone special,